Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of the Xenothesis podcast. This episode we're covering chapters 13 and 14 from part 3 Nursery of Book 1 Dawn of Octavia Butler's Xenogenesis trilogy. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host,
Michael Glinka. Hi everyone.
Hi Michael.
It's finally end of part 3 Nursery.
Yes.
Quite exciting to see what brings them, what happens next after part 4. But I need to say, Richard, I know there's gonna be some serious problems coming. I talked about like the whole civil war thing on Earth. It's definitely gonna happen during the training. It's just after the chapter 14, I just feel like it's definitely is gonna happen. Something serious gonna happen.
Yeah, so there do seem to be some foreshadowing of trouble in this from Joseph's reaction at the end, and we've got Paul dying, so some fairly serious stuff occurring.
Yeah, it's just well, let's get to it maybe, because I think that the very short chapter 13 is the perfect sort of. Maybe not, but it sort of just does foreshadow things, and then in the chapter 14 we do get sort of the reasoning why humans wouldn't be happy, and I think it really does tell what's gonna happen.
Okay, yeah. So chapter 13 is very short. It's like half a page.
Yeah, so we'll just sort of tell what happened quickly, and then get to chapter 14, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So for my chapter 13 predictions, well, 13 and 14, because the last episode I sort of predicted, put both predictions, and I thought that basically there's gonna be in the chapter 13 some description of the aftermath of what the Uloi are doing and what Joseph and Liv experience again. And in chapter 14 we sort of get there's final preparations to release the humans to the trainings area, and I just thought that there's definitely something bound to happen. So
okay,
I guess I was sort of correct on this, but honestly, out of all people, I was sort of expecting that maybe Peter will do something silly, but yeah.
It's perhaps not quite what I was expecting when I was first reading this would happen to Peter, but yeah, something does happen to him.
Yeah, poor fella. But in the end, I think I get his reaction, but we'll get to it. So in chapter 13, it's a really short chapter, as we mentioned earlier. It just depicts a brief conversation between Nikanj and Joseph about the whole process of imprinting, and basically the whole conversation is behind why the Uloi are dragging people. I know for the sheer reason is that to dull the natural fear of strangers and of difference. And basically the argument is about Joseph is counter-arguing against it too, that humans shouldn't be dragged, that they should be like Lilith went through the whole process, but Nikanj refutes this to say it's more actually to protect the humans from themselves, and to really to teach them that there are more pleasant things that are involved with imprinting with Uloi. And that's pretty much the whole chapter. But like for me, that's sort of dragging people to trying to get them get not accustomed, but more actually even more like be dependent on someone. It
creates effectively a chemical bond, chemical dependence between the humans who are being drugged and the Uloi.
Yeah, it's so fishy. It's like basically a drug dealer creating dependency for his basically customers, because he's giving them something that is so addictive that they can't just break away from it. It's so,
and at the same time it has the effect of cutting them off from everyone else as well, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
It's like a perfect drug for like cult inculcation.
Oh yeah,
right? Because it's not only does it like sort of addict you to the cult leader, but it also like creates distance and like a repulsion between you and everyone else in your like social circle.
Honestly, this is like super dystopian sort of I would say life where basically a cult leader comes up with a drug and then basically it's like I would not be happy in this situation. I can understand why everybody else would not be happy. It's such it's a bad thing, simply saying.
It's a sort of major imposition on liberty, beyond even the like locking you up in a room.
The problem is like, it's one thing is locking someone in a room, but the other thing is making the person want to be locked in that room and not wanting to come out. It's just, I think this whole situation, this whole idea of, Lilith developing, awakening those humans and stuff like that, I think it should have happened in the jungle, where basically people can sort of go around, discover they're actually trapped in the alien ship, and then basically introduce them to the Oankali, in that step, there's the Oankali, and give them some time, because 250 years have passed since the annihilation of the planet.
Yep.
Few years or months shouldn't make any difference to the Oankali about it, right?
It definitely seems like they're not in any great hurry.
No,
and yet they're doing it in this kind of very strange way.
Well, we've discussed about the time passing that we are not fully aware of how much the time has passed between certain events in the book, but it just feels to me that definitely it's only been a few weeks for the humans in that cell, and I think it would be such an easier process for Lilith in general if it was the jungle that this she goes, this is an imitation of Watson, this is for us to be prepared, blah blah blah. Long story short, get used to it, and I'll teach you survival and everything. And I don't know, it just feel or the other way around. Like for every human that is awakened, there's Lilith, and then there's the Oankali, and then basically the human imprints, and then at the end of the day, the humans are already sort of pacified, but without the use of drugs in a way. I don't know.
Interesting.
And anyway, it's
just to return to the point you made earlier about the difference between like being locked up and then like making you want to be locked up thing. It's the difference between the 1984 scenario and the Brave New World scenario, right? So in 1984 you've got like the oppressive big brother government that will use force and kind of blunt, obvious instruments to make you do what it wants. But in the Brave New World scenario, they don't need to kind of grind you under your heel because you want to do what the world government, whatever it is, wants. Because it is, take another hit of Soma, it'll be fine. You'll be happy. You'll want to do this. It's nice. Go enjoy yourself. It's the same kind of thing here, right? It's they're using not so much the heel and more of the.
It's more of the carrot than
have a
the
nice
stick.
time. Yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's putting ourselves in this position, right? At this very point of the story, I feel like if in Joseph's place as well, I think this whole situation I would agree with him that this shouldn't be happening. And I think this really is pronounced why it's so problematic in chapter 14. So I think we should actually get on with that, because I think this will really add up to this discussion, because chapter 14 really, there are some places that there's so, I don't know, it's like Lilith almost predicts the future for me, at least personally, without reading obviously the book, but I feel like she almost predicts the future.
Okay, one final observation there is that the Brave New World scenario is almost scarier because it's a little bit seductive.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You kind of want to give into it. And that's what they're going for here.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. In 1984, there's always going to be a opposition, right? People finally will start to get, this is enough, right? We've had enough. Whereas, Brave New World is like, well, it feels too good to break away.
Yep, there's not an opportunity to develop an opposition because everyone's just fairly content.
Yeah.
All the more insidious.
I know. Anyway.
So, Chapter 14.
Chapter 14, everyone. So it starts a bit dark, I think, because we are told about the incident between Peter and his Uloi. Basically, we're told about Peter's behavior, while being dragged, complete different behavior, happy, in peace, basically internal peace, laughing, joking with people. Just he didn't try to do anything. And Lilith, hearing this later, this is a quote from the book, wondered what there was to laugh at the incident, because there was a point where he was laughing about the whole incident, and Lilith was like, "What? There's nothing really to be laughing about the incident." But she thought, but the Uloi products produced drugs could be potent, under the influence. Peter might have laughed at anything. Under their influence, he accepted union and pleasure. And for me, this was such a premonition, like hint of what's going to happen, because the whole idea when somebody's like laughing off a serious incident when they were trying to rape someone, the guy is a psychopath, or there's something really dark about him that basically, or he's basically breaking away from the drug influence and he's just playing, pretending.
It's interesting quite how stark an effect it seems to have on him, because he seems to be very different behaviorally when he's under the influence of this than when not, which is, I don't know, maybe it's a bad sign about his mental state.
Yeah, I think so. That's what really strikes me here, is that his mental state must be in serious problem. Like there must be some serious underlying problem, because if when people suddenly get so cheery and everything, and then they're super depressed, let's say, without whatever stimulant, there's something serious going on. And I think that was the problem here, that there was something undiscovered and untreated, that basically maybe it was the shock of the fact that the aliens exist or whatever, but whatever it is just it was asking for problems.
If this drug is disinhibiting, then and he seems fairly disinhibited when it's gone away, but is not at all when he's not drugged. It suggests that he's exerting a lot of mental energy to maintain his kind of his normal persona almost. It seems like he's in some sense out of balance under normal circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, and it shows here, because the book goes further saying, but that this whole euphoria doesn't last long. It's once the drug started to wear off, Peter started thinking that he was humiliated and enslaved, that his humanity and masculinity was profaned, right? So his behavior, obviously anybody would feel like that, especially after the whole fact of rejecting the whole idea of there's aliens, and then aliens come and they drug you up and you're so happy about it, and then once the drug starts to wear off, you're like, they were drugging me, this is not good. And it's, and what else they'll try to do, maybe like he himself was trying to assist in the whole rape situation, maybe they will try to do something to him, right? So suddenly it's a bit hypocritical, but it does, anybody in his situation would feel the same.
Yeah, it feels like to put it in terms of moral foundations theory, he has a strong kind of what's the axis as well, purity kind of what's the other end of the axis, the sort of purity contamination thing, and he feels like this, and that's kind of an important part of his moral perceptions. He feels as though he's been sort of violated and contaminated.
Yeah. I think this is but it's such a hypocritical thing to do, right? He didn't have anything against violation of someone, and yet when it came to him, right, it's suddenly like no touchy, right? It's like, yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah, I mean, in like the other axis, or another axis might be like the authority kind of component there. So if another part of his an important part of his moral system is kind of the authority axis, then if he conceived to be him in some sense in a place of authority, then that would fit. I mean, it is hypocritical, but it's still, and it makes sense from
his side
from someone with that kind of composition of moral foundations. Yeah,
seriously. But anyway, that. And which this whole idea of him feeling violated leads to the fact that once they were alone, Peter and his Uloi, the thing is, the Uloi didn't realize that the drug is wearing off, because Peter was acting, like his face was saying one thing, but his body language, I guess, was very different to what it was actually under actual influence of the drug. So when they were alone, basically Peter suddenly attacked the Uloi, but unfortunately for Peter, once he hit that spot, the delicate spot or whatever we were told about before, it's the defense reflexes of the Uloi got triggered, and basically he got himself stung with that poison that we were told about from Chitaya at the very beginning. And it says here his own contracting muscles broke several of his bones, and then he went into a shock and died.
Yeah, that's quite a violent sounding death.
It really does, when your muscles contract so much that your own bones break. Like, I thought maybe the ligaments and tendons would break first, but wow.
I mean, there is that what's the type of break that just sort of like pops the bone to where the muscle attaches off, which is it's a really nasty injury, because it's super hard to recover from well, because even if you can get the bone to like fuse back, it's there's a weak point in that connection, and that's now where the tendon attaches. So whenever you kind of pull on it, you're doing it at a weakened part of the bone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I mean, you put a couple of like references in here.
Yeah, I thought, like, I was thinking about what type of sort of venom it is, that Uloi have, right, as in the defense, right? Because there are some neurotoxins that basically still, degrade the neuron cells or the myelin sheath on the neurons. But this one I thought maybe is more like a myotoxin, where it basically degrades the muscles. But then I thought to myself, well, it's actually not what's happening. The idea is the muscles are spazzing so much that, like, contracting so much that it's destroyed. So I wasn't certain about what sort of venom would this how would you describe or characterize this type of venom?
As I was aware of kind of venoms that would lead to like paralysis, so that like the inability to contract the muscle, or like a rigidity of the muscle, but nothing that would be like producing these kind of spasms. That was not something I'd encountered as a real toxin.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I was curious about this, like, I looked at, like, muscle venoms that involve muscles, right? And, so-called myotoxins are out there that potentially, but these lead to, as I said, degradation of the muscle. The review paper that I found actually showed, like, the images of the cryo images, tomography images that basically show, like, the layers of the muscle actin myosin fibers by basically breaking apart. There's just complete breakdown of those molecules. So it's not exactly that, and it's not exactly a neurotoxin, because neurotoxin usually affects the nerves, and usually what it leads to is basically your body just switches off, right? It's causes pain because the neurons are being destroyed and exposed to the environment, but it's not that still. So
yeah, it's a perhaps non-existent class of poisons, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, wow. Honestly, thankfully it's not, because woof.
Yeah. This paper committed an awful graphical sin. They've used a 3-dimensional bar plot. Yeah. No, we can't have this. And it's unnecessary.
Yeah, but
I could have done that with a 2D plot.
Oh well, quality of papers, eh? But I mean,
3D graphics.
I know, right?
That are not necessary.
Yeah,
make me sad.
But I was going to say that we humans have developed some nasty stuff, right? Like some nasty toxins that linger in the bodies and destroy the DNA or mutate our DNA in a way that basically you can spend your whole life in pain and never be able to recover. We are a nasty bunch of beings that really...
Yeah, I mean, nature's got plenty of very unpleasant, slow ways to die.
Oh, I know.
We've just added a few.
Yeah, I mean, yes, in a way, if you look in this way, it's absolutely, I mean, it's like, it's what but it's probably minuscule. But like, I would say, to be honest, we've talked about before, the botulinum toxin.
Yes.
I honestly am still currently I'll always be amazed by it. Like the fact that you only need like few milligrams to actually wipe out the whole humanity, population of humanity, because it's just such a potent toxin that literally need like nanograms or picograms of it just to kill off a human. It's just wow. It's,
impressively potent stuff. Yeah.
It's like, see, this is what I don't understand about the evolution, right? You get this like spiders, right? That their venom is capable of like killing an animal, and yet the only like actual target of like for them like to hunt is just like a maximum a small rodent.
Yeah.
So I don't get I just don't get what's the evolution is just overly crazy. It's just like, oh yeah, it's gonna evolve toxins so potent that you can kill a fucking elephant, and yet it only has...
Presumably there's still some advantage to be gained by just sort of overkilling it for the rat, right? Because if you bite the rat and it goes down immediately, then you're less likely to get injured in the process. Whereas you bite the rat with something a bit underpowered and it kind of turns around and bites you, then more of an issue.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. But like, there's a limit, right? Even if you aimed like at a cat size of a being, right? But it's just, I don't know. It's just, for me, it's like
my favorite venomous animals are the duck-billed platypus.
Okay.
Because for starters, like, they're seasonally venomous, and they're the only venomous mammal, and they're venomous in a weird way. So the males of the species in like the season where they kind of like fight with one another grow a heel spur that has the venom in it, and then it kind of goes away again when they're not in this season. Yeah. The venom is enough to kill a small dog, and the platypus is quite a bit smaller than a dog. Pretty small animals. But yeah.
I find platypus is so beautiful animal. It's such a beautiful animal. It's like a perfect sort of indication of the blend between like the outside, I don't know, lizards behavior towards a mammal. Like, I don't know, like it's an example of like the predecessors, our predecessors, basically the early predecessors. It's
it kind of they branched off. It's like the monotremes, which are the egg-laying mammals, of which there are only 3. The long and the short-snouted echidna, which are a bit like a porcupine, and then there's the platypus all on its own as a just weird thing. They lay eggs, but they lactate. They don't have nipples though. They just kind of like produce it from their stomachs. It's really thick. They do like short hibernations, and they have electroperception. So that weird bill thing that they have is a super sensitive to electrical fields.
Oh.
So they can detect like shrimp and stuff in the water.
Yeah.
And then eat them. But they swim with their eyes and their ears closed and just rely on this electroperception stuff to detect their prey.
That is, I would say this is like probably how our predecessors would look like, basically, just like when evolution was taking place. But I need to say, a lot about platypus. Well done. Like, this is...
Yeah. I mean, I had a bit of an obsession with it when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
I was like, this animal is just so freaking weird. I have to know more about it.
Fair enough.
I think they may also have like the densest fur.
Really?
They have like some on their underbellies. They have some crazy density. It's like 800 fibers per square millimeter or something. Some ridiculous. Wow. It might be centimeter. But yeah, fascinating animal to learn more about. They're just very, very strange. Like nothing else. But this has been something of a tangent. So,
but to be honest, I love listening to tangents like this when you know so much. But especially a topic like this, from a childhood that like. This is a platypus, it's a mammal, but it's actually not, but it actually is. And it's just, you go on more and more in this rabbit hole, and it's just never-ending, carousel of fun. But yeah, going back to the topic, let's go off the tangent.
Where were we?
So we were talking about the whole thing, Peter dying and his whole muscles, like, just contracting so much that basically he breaks bones and then dies because of the shock. And... the fact is that the Ooloi tried to help him, but once it recovered from the punches, but it was way too late. There's nothing to do but to take Peter's body out and send it for the Ooloi's mates, and the Ooloi remained catatonic.
Yeah, it seems as though Peter was just kind of super unlucky in that he accidentally whacked the Ooloi in the solar plexus or some equivalent, right?
Yeah.
Then it just kind of responded like reflexively. And stung him before it could stop itself.
Yeah.
And then it's quite interesting the way that Ooloi responds to it, because after it's sort of recovered from this, like being having this kind of reflective response, and immediately he's trying to help him, and then and there's this passage here. So the Ooloi sat down beside his body, its head and body tentacles drawn into hard lumps. It did not move or speak. Its cool flesh grew even cooler, and it seemed to be as dead as the human it was apparently mourning. And it was interesting to me the way it responded there, because it's the Ooloi and the Oankali in general have this strange relationship with the humans, because they seem like perfectly willing to kind of hurt them and so on, but then or subject them to psychological torment. But then when they accidentally kill one, they're genuinely saddened by it.
I think it's maybe because this whole idea of a conversation about like the perspective from an Oankali, right, would be great for us to observe what's the difference, right? And I think here we have actually the first sort of insight of what does it actually mean for an Oankali to imprint on a human. I think the idea is that although, because they're so alien, our understanding of their attachment might be... It's too bizarre for us to understand, and yet the idea that the Ooloi could not save the human that it was imprinting with, it must have somehow like really affected. And I think this is, it shows here we finally see something that the Oankali are not perfect with, right? Because so far the Oankali were shown as the perfect beings, right? Understanding. Although Kaguya,
they screwed up with Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say Paul Titus and Kaguya. The idea of Kaguya, not listening to Nikan showed that they're not always perfect. But this is the first sort of perfect example of like that. Even Oankali are bound to make mistakes, and this is the consequence of it, right? And it shows that this is the whole idea of the drugging of people, and then once the drug wears off, it's where the problem is gonna lie. Yeah.
That's it seems like whatever this imprinting process they're working on, it's sort of creating these bonds between the humans and the Oolois. It's not enough to protect them from one another.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating now, and we know that I mean, later on, this whole situation shows even more, but like explains, it goes into more details. But I think this is the first time that we can sort of go inside of what's going on through the sort of Oankali head, or at least their reactions to things. And I feel like if something happened, for example, to Lilith, a very similar reaction, we would see very similar reaction from Nikanj. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
So
yeah, it's sort of it's interesting quite how viscerally they seem to feel it, because the Suloi is kind of like catatonic for quite a while afterwards, and is not able to kind of bring itself together to go and help Jean.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I sort of imagine it. Yeah, it's. I mean, I never would want to get myself in a situation when you accidentally kill someone, or someone, some being. But like, it must be additionally to that sort of feeling, it must be additionally more detrimental, because like more affecting the Ooloi because of the imprinting process. Whatever,
because of the bond.
The bond, yeah. But then, yes, as you mentioned, it then goes to Jean, who was, I guess, Peter, who was Peter's partner, and partner to the Ooloi, and she, although we know that the description, she was a big lady, quite tall, strong, but now scared and alone, when Lilith tried to approach her, to try moving away from her, while shouting at her, no, don't come closer to me. She was going through that period of the Ooloi induced reclusiveness, meaning no one could get near her except for her human partner and the Ooloi, or the Oankali family. But it was extreme. Like, Lilith thought to herself, it was actually pretty extreme to a reaction. I don't think even Lilith had this sort of behavior. But not realizing that, Lilith goes and tries to get Nikanj's attention. He goes like, can you help Jean? Help is coming for her, but look at her. She's going to break before it gets here. And as this conversation was happening, Jean wedged herself in the corner, crying silently, looking around in confusion. So that's when Nikanj detaches itself from the rest of the Ooloi's conversation and then goes towards her. And meantime, as this was happening, the rest of the Ooloi went and just completely dragged all the humans up, because the news of the death, or Peter's death, just started to spread. So everybody had to be under the whole situation needed to be put under control.
That's again reminds me a little bit of the Brave New World thing. Something bad happens, someone goes around dispensing soma.
Yeah, just take this, calm down. But the thing is, nobody can approach Jean, because if anybody, only her Ooloi can drag her up, because otherwise it will it could cause get her harmed, right? So it's the whole bonding seems to be really a serious matter. And Nikanj then goes, stops so like several feet away from her, and listen, no, the only person that's dead is Peter, but there's still her Ooloi, Techjat, we are told its name, that was only injured, and her siblings are coming to help. And although Jean didn't understand what it meant by saying siblings, because she never had any siblings, Nikanj explains that Techjat mates are coming to help her and help Techjat.
It's in case it wasn't clear, Techjat appears dead. Like it's the catatonia thing that it's doing doesn't. So I think Jean is unclear if it's okay. So there was that clarification, and then the use of siblings here was a bit weird to me.
Yeah, because I mean it's parents, isn't it? Like this is the whole idea that they, if I remember, is that how they treat it? Like the whole. It's like a partner, right? It's a mate, right? So it's not really a sibling.
Yeah. It's as far as I can tell, they have they've got it's like a 3-person relationship, right? There's the male, the female, and the Ooloi, and then they seem to be adding a human into that family grouping.
Yes.
Which, it's not really. I suppose, like, what's the phrase? Paramours from the polyamory usage would seem like a more suitable name.
Okay, I have no idea anything about this topic, so you have to explain to me what does it mean.
I think so. I can't remember now the difference between a paramour and a metamor. I forget how it works. I think it's like, someone with whom your partner also has a relationship would be the paramour, and then I think the metamor is like one more removed than that. So it's someone who has a relationship with someone who is a paramour of your partner.
Okay,
if I remember correctly. Yeah. So that's the. I don't know. It's just siblings seems like a weird descriptor in that context. Mm.
Alabama. No, right. I'm not gonna go there. But yeah, it's a weird thing. I think it's this idea of like, so what is Lilith then a sibling to Arja and Dichan? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's according to this usage, apparently.
I don't know. It's a weird. I think it's weird how they.
Yeah, I think it's probably deliberately chosen to make it seem a bit weird.
Maybe.
So I just emphasize the slightly odd nature of these kind of relationship structures, these families that they've.
I guess maybe in the Oankali, the language, the language of Oankali, there is a equivalent word that explains that properly, that relation, because this is, it's a human that they are going to trade with. Yeah. So I guess there's a specific word for that in the language, but because there's no really a equivalence of that, then basically siblings is probably the closest sort of type of relation.
Yeah, I suppose the lack of a sort of a direct translation means they've gone for something closer. And maybe it's meant more in the sense of like fraternal, right? It's a kind of a brotherly relationship or familial. As opposed to necessarily specifically children from the same parent.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
but yeah, I guess so. But this is
anyway. Yeah, I just wanted to note that the oddity of the choice of the siblings.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's fair enough, and also share your vast knowledge about polyamorous relationships. But see, this is where the chapter goes more into why the whole drugging situation is a problem, because that's when the Curt tries to get involved, and even against the odds, while being drugged, he shows he powers through his this drugged state and tries to help Jin, but Nikanj tells him that her bonding with the will is too strong, too heavily reinforced, so he needs to distance himself from Jin, otherwise it can go badly. And
yeah, I think Curt is also feeling that as well, so he can't get close to her, not merely because she won't let him, but he doesn't kind of want to either.
Yeah,
I think.
And that's where Curt's Oloy gets involved and touches him, and then Curt just goes limp basically and takes him away. But Lilith just in an internal sort of thought says things like she knew that Curt was unlikely to forgive that humbling, this whole situation again, like Peter basically. And for me, this will basically is a story that will repeat itself, right? The whole situation, and I'm sure that other people will also be involved in this situation, feeling that humiliation, that violation, as you said, earlier on. But that's when Tejat's mates come in, initially scared. Jin was scared, but a bit less. And this is what book says. Lilith watched sadly, knowing that the first signal Jin will receive were olfactory. The male and female smelled good, smelled like family, and brought together by the same Oloy. When they took her hands, they felt right. There was a real chemical affinity. That's when they, take her away to Tejat, and then, in the room where it was just standing catatonically and, I don't know, just trying to sort of sit together as a family.
Yeah. That's it's I don't know. I find it difficult to articulate my response to that because it's so
bizarre, isn't it?
It's very strange.
You get two completely random people suddenly coming to a room, and they're strangers, but internally your body is telling you they're friends. It's it's really
olfaction is supposed to be the sense that produces kind of the strongest, the most evocative sensation of memory, right? So like if you smell something, it's supposed to be very good at evoking strong memories. And I think if I remember correctly, I might have to check the research on it. I think particularly like emotional state, like memory of emotional state. I may be wrong about that.
Okay.
But yeah, so that I think that element of it is a good addition because it has this, if you go somewhere and it smells like something familiar,
it will bring you the memory back.
Yeah.
No,
which is an odd thing when you've got strangers who are having that impression.
Yeah,
it's like there's a kind of odd psychiatric condition where you're like convinced that everyone around you has been replaced by like imposters.
Oh,
I think I might have mentioned this at some point.
We've talked about this before. I remember making notes about this. Yes, we did talk about this.
And I think it feels like the inverse of that, right? So it's strangers who feel very familiar as opposed to people who are and appear familiar but feel strange.
It's similar, sort of like a deja vu when you see someone, you're like, I think I've met this person before, but I get this. I understand. Now, it feels to me that it's a really bizarre thing, and I can imagine Jean being a bit confused, seriously confused about this. But as long as they're there to help, I guess it's fine. But this is where like the chapter ends, basically, where this whole idea of the drugging and situation is why it's problematic. And this is Lilith stood staring after Jean, hardly aware of Joseph's coming to stand beside her. He was drugged, but the drug had only made him reckless. Peter was right, he said angrily. She frowned. Peter? Right to try to kill? Right to die? He died a human, and he almost managed to take one of them with him. She let him. So what? What's changed? On Earth we can change things, not here. Will we want to buy then? What will we be, I wonder? Not human. Not anymore. And that's where the chapter ends. And I think this is very good argument why there's gonna be this whole civil war problem with the Oankali versus human. The humans that don't want to deal with the Oankali, be with the Oankali, and the humans that just gave up their sort of fate to the Oankali. It's just this whole sentence here that the whole idea is that they drugged them, and basically this whole situation is a problem, and basically will they be human anymore once they finish with it? And this is the problem, and we've discussed this many times.
Yep. And it's I mean, in a sense, they won't be, right? That's kind of the point of the whole trade thing, right? They're not going to be humans that are just human. They're going to be humans that are at least partly Oankali. And they seem to be selecting, right, to a degree. They're picking out the people who can handle that, who can accustom themselves to the prospect of becoming a part of the Oankali. Whereas those that are not able to countenance that are not surviving this process.
It's what Kaguya said, that she, as in Lilith, and her, all the other humans that are with her will not understand understand the Oankali, but her children will. And I think that's a thing, like this whole idea of I don't know, it just feels to me that the books are written in a way that shows that what will humans do in such situations. And I think the moment there's a children born of the humans and the Oankali, a lot of things will change. And the whole idea of people, those against the Oankali trying to kill the children, and then of course the family's not fighting back because they're the children and stuff like that. It's getting clearer and clearer, and in this chapter we finally see what the underlying problem and reason behind fighting against Oankali has been pretty much written down.
Yeah. So it's not adaptive to be willing to have this sense of violation when the Uloi violate you. It's not adaptive to have this kind of sense of strongly human identity and be unwilling to compromise on that in this scenario.
Yeah.
And you're being removed from the population.
Yeah, it's pretty. To be honest, I thought to myself just now, how, because in the book we're told that there are 3 different sort of clans or families of the Oankali. That's those that continue traveling further. They take some of the humans, but they travel further, right? They're those that's gonna stay on the planet, and then the third group was I think the that build a new ship and go away on the new ship.
Oh yes, yeah, the new ship, the existing ship, and the
yes.
planet. Yeah.
So that's those 3 families, right? But always, and then at some point Nick Kanj explained to Lilith that when those 2 sort of different groups of Oankali meet, right, the 2 different ships, and they they meet, right, the biological memory of all those sort of combinations is always there. So right, so imagine like there's branching, right? So hypothetically, let's discuss so there's a branching, right? At some point that this group of Oankali went here, this group of Oankali went there, right? They mixed up and blah blah blah, and they go in, and then those groups finally meet another aliens. Those groups meet another type of aliens, right? So there's a branching in that sort of in the species. So now those let's say after n number of branching, they finally meet somewhere, right? So now they have, even though they have all this biological history, right, behind them, and
they've retained enough to do a merge,
right? Yeah. So like they meet each other, and they meet this in their biological memory. They remember, this sort of guys we were combined together. I don't know, maybe like 3 million generations backwards, but now they're so different, right? Wouldn't that cause? Do you think, wouldn't that cause some sort of problems? Obviously, I'm sort of comparing like human always fighting each other, or I can imagine that causing some conflict. Unless, of course, Oankali were like, that doesn't matter. They share the genetic code between each other, and then that's that's it. But
yeah, it's an interesting one because it seems like. Once you become Oankali, one of the features of it seems to be this desire to exchange your genes with others, right, to do the trade. So it seems like anyone who wasn't like sufficiently diverged from the Oankali that they'd lost that element, which seems to be a very core component of being Oankali, would just be okay with that merge, right? Because they'd want to know what the respective groups had learned, what their new genetic innovations were, so they could integrate them into their branch.
I just imagine there's gonna be so many branches at this point that at some point there must be some diversity. And for example, let's take, what if groups of Oankali accidentally start the trade on the same type of species, right? Like, let's take, if there's abundance of that species, right, that should be okay. But what if there's not? Like, what if with humans excuse me, what if the humans, like, there's only a limited number of them? Like, would there be internal fighting? What's gonna be like? I feel like it's maybe Oankali are above all of this, right? And there are like higher level beings that basically their conflict doesn't exist between themselves. But for me, it's quite and yes, as you mentioned, like, what if, for example, they meet the other Oankali? Let's put this hypothetical scenario where there's no other species anymore left that hasn't been met with Oankali, right? So at this point, what do the Oankali do? Like, you meet your like fellow brethren somewhere from other branch of the gene, right? And you're like, there's basically no more genetic exchange possible between anyone, right? Because there's some connection, there's some imprint of the Oankali in that species anyway. So what do they do at this point?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's one of those, it's a difficult question, right? I mean, it's the same problem that we'd face with resources, right? And if we continue to expand exponentially, we'll eventually hit some ceiling of what's available. They'd have, like, if they eventually span to incorporate all of the available genetic diversity in their light cone, then, you know, they're out of luck. But at the same time, a lot of stuff's going on in separate regions of space, right? So if they're still evolving independently in different groups and still traveling around, then there'd still be potentially new innovations from different environments that they might be able to swap for quite a long time.
I guess
before,
so.
Then you start getting into heat death, the universe stuff. But
considering that, I think at some point, like if we exclude the heat death and everything of the of the universe, etc., I feel like at some point, right? Like obviously there will be enough diversity at some point, but at some point I feel like they are diverging, and then at some point they're gonna start converging again. It's like a basic.
Yeah, so in the limit you just have homogeneity, but that's, I don't know, physics.
Yeah. But it's just for me, it is interesting that, like, the whole idea if the Oankali have either had a conflict with another Oankali spaceship or like branched subspecies of the Oankali. I don't know. It's just
It's, we've never really seen what their like political process or how their kind of leadership structure, if one exists, works, right? They've always been kind of in the.
We only heard on mentions
in the position of authority.
Yeah, we only had mentions of like the whole idea of like the collective agreeing that Lilith, should do this whole prison thing, and then the collective agreeing that that whatever the guy's name who went to the cupboard was, Derek or whatever, he could put to sleep and stuff like that. And then obviously Peter's breaking arm, healing after a few days. This whole process is like there is a collective sort of understanding, but like, for example, what happens to the collective sort of agreement when they meet their subspecies Oankali, right?
Yeah, I said we don't know what the mechanism of consensus is in that distributed decision making thing they seem to have. It's just, they come to a collective decision, but what does that mean in practice, right? Did they cast votes? How were they weighted? How were they counted? What were the options? Yeah. It's
Yeah, I honestly, it is interesting, and I think like it'd be interesting book to read, seeing what the perspective of Oankali
and that the capacity that they have. So when we mentioned earlier that Nikanj was kind of interrupted from its conversation with the other Uloi, we glossed over slightly that conversation is not a verbal one.
Oh yes, right? It was the connection, just, like that they were touching each other to converse.
Yeah, but I mean that's perfectly normal for them, so it doesn't become relevant. But so they're just they're connected via their direct neural links thing, so they have this like degree to which they can share their thoughts and perhaps even do something like come to one of these consensus decisions as a not quite a hive mind thing, but they have almost that capability, right? They can kind of share thoughts almost.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it just feels to me like this chapter is set up actual like proved, I think, in a way, my predictions of what's going to happen and why is it going to happen. At least it gave the explanation why it's going to take, why all the civil war and stuff like that is going to take place. So yeah,
and so it's might say something about our heroes as well, right? So the properties that it takes to survive as the protagonist in this situation, Peter probably has characteristics that in kind of a more classical literary context, I don't know, if he was like a knight or something from a medieval thing, like his kind of activity might be like the winning strategy.
Yes, I guess so, yeah.
In this case, Lilith, who has kind of been willing to sort of, or not exactly willing, but has been able to kind of knuckle under and handle, with her sanity intact, this repressive frame, is the one who's surviving.
I guess, to be honest, I feel like Lilith's behavior will make her survive the longest. At least in the long term, in the long run. But like, yeah, it's just I feel like those two groups that have formed initially now will evolve into something else that is the pro and anti Oankali, basically, and that's what's gonna happen. Like this is where it's gonna play. I mean, of course, the humans will be imprinted on the aliens, but then the question is, how far does the imprinting take them? And like, what's going to happen is, for example, let's say a human kills the Oankali. Is it going to undergo the same thing as the Uloi did after killing Peter? Is it going to go catatonic? Is it going to affect it mentally? Will the human just go completely insane?
Or at least if it kills one with which it's been imprinted, paired in some sense.
What if, for example, happens to a human that Uloi has been killed by another human? Right, so is the human going to go insane and then attack the other humans, or what's going to happen? So
yeah, that's interesting, because it doesn't seem like it, at least as far as it got with Peter, it wasn't enough to prevent him from raising a hand in violence against his imprinted Uloi. So that doesn't seem to be enough to guarantee there won't be conflict.
Yeah, it seems like that it wasn't enough to even the Kanj told us that the imprinting can kill someone. If push comes to shove, I think that's what will happen. Like, the humans would be able to fight back, and I think that's
it doesn't seem to produce kind of a higher level cognition compulsion, right? So that people, they're aware of the fact that they think differently about it. Like, they don't necessarily want not to hurt the Uloi or whatever. So there's like that disconnect. So they have this kind of subconscious or very visceral sensation of not wanting to hurt them or being attached to them or whatever. But they still have the higher level awareness that this was something that was done to them, and that it's not necessarily an accurate representation of how they feel, or how they would feel had they not been subjected to it. It's so it creates an internal conflict.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen next. But we finally finished this part. And it's the next one is the training floor, and which basically is self-explanatory. We're going to learn what the humans are gonna do on the training floor of the ship, and then before they're gonna get sent to the Earth.
So do you have any other sort of specific predictions about what will go on during their rainforest survival training, which seems to be what this is going to consist of?
I think, well, in chapter 1, I think, for my prediction for chapter 1, at least for the time being, is that we are sort of introduced at the training room. The humans are introduced, I mean, where Lilith spent a year of her life before. And it'll be like a first walkthrough of, the plans of like what they're planning to do with the humans, how they're gonna train, and there's definitely going to be, the whole idea of, Lilith is going to be like, there's one thing, what Peter did is one thing, but what will the rest of the humans do, right? After the whole, the first sort of wave of the imprinting, that strong imprinting process gonna, diminish now, gonna go back to normal. What will the humans do? And I'm sure there will be some humans trying, and this is more like a long-term, I think, prediction, but like, I think some humans will definitely try to escape and then realize they're basically probably in like a dome of within, the ship, that basically they can't escape anywhere. And that's pretty much like what's going to happen. They're like, oh, actually, we're still trapped. So, but I think there's going to be this internal problem where some humans will not be happy with the whole idea of, being like, of what the Oankali did. And there's going to be the group that was involved with Peter is going to do something silly again.
Okay.
Instead of like Lilith saying, on Earth, there's a chance, but here not.
So you don't think they'll be kind of cowed by what happened to Peter and the experience that they've had at the end of this training session?
No.
You think there'll still be a few who've got some
I'm pretty sure
fight left in them?
Sure Curt is not going to like it, and he's going to be one of the people that's definitely going to try to do something. Because it feels to me like if he was able to, like Lilith said herself, that whatever he, whatever he felt, that humiliation, I can't really speak anymore. He will feel it will be the same as with Peter. But the question is now, like, what will the Oankali do, right? What's I don't know. It's interesting and let's see.
So I just took a look at the length of the chapters. I think we can probably do chapters 1 and 2.
Okay.
Next week or next episode rather.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do chapter 1 and 2 then. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to see if there's going to be further development between Lilith, Joseph, and Nikanj. If, for example, are humans going to be left again alone, or are they going to be with the Uloi? Will, for example, one day the group that's led by, I don't know, Curt or someone, just secretly building up some resources and basically just go and try to slaughter up the Oankali? I don't know. But it feels to me that something is approaching. Yeah,
because it's interesting because we've just done this imprinting thing. So do we think that the Uloi are going to still be there in the survival training, and they're going to be?
I think so. Although we were told
part of the community.
We were told that Lilith is going to train them, but I don't know. It feels to me that there might be but this is the thing, right? Now, if the humans are left alone again, away from the Oankali, that would mean that that sort of first shock of the aliens has been bypassed, and in the massive room wherever they are, I'm sure they would probably find some way or another to sort of plan something that the Oankali might not be fully aware of, or maybe they'd be fully aware of but not of the details, right? Because considering the fact that they could observe them everywhere, and then basically, some massive problem or like some serious situation may arise. So I wouldn't leave the humans alone. I would make sure that the Oankali are still there, just to try to pacify the humans, just in case something bad happens.
Okay, right. I'll not ask any more questions about your predictions.
I guess it's hard to tell, but I think if at this point, considering what happened to Peter and what Curt is undergoing now, it would be foolish from the Oankali side just to leave them be.
Okay.
But anyway. So shall we?
I think we should probably wrap up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, everyone, we were Xenogenesis. You can find us everywhere. Well, on every possible place that we upload this podcast. You can find us location on xenogenesis.com. I was Michael Glinko.
I was Richard Axon.
Bye. Goodbye.